Welcome, Wargamers, to the deadly and unforgiving Mortal Realms as we tackle the lore behind the novel Dominion by Darius Hinks, a wonderful book that really sets the stage for this next meta chapter, I guess you could say, in Age of Sigmar lore. Now, we already did a little book club surrounding this novel, and that was fantastic. There's a little, I kind of marked out a little 3-minute spoiler-free review at the top of it. So if you still want to read the book, hold off and watch that later. This video is for folks who just kind of want the cliff notes to keep up and aren't really worried about spoilers. So I'm kind of glide over the main points of the novel and kind of pick out some themes that I think are really important. It's not going to go into a ton of detail on many scenes or characters, but like I said, cliff notes, major story beats, and what makes it such a great book. So our story begins in Ger, Realm of Beasts, specifically in the city of Excelsis, with two characters, Zagora and Nixar, sister and brother respectively, who were orphaned in their early lives and fled to Excelsis for safety. Now, Zagora grew up to become one of the Free Guild detachment's, kind of leaders in Excelsis. Basically, she went the life of a soldier, while Nixar became more of a rogue-like figure, a hired sword that deals with shady people. But he himself isn't really a bad guy, he's just kind of in bad company. Well, the two, through a bit of the early book hijinks, come into contact with a prophecy stone. Remember, the city of Excelsis is built around a massive shard of the old world, and for whatever reason, when people touch the rocks that are mined from it, they briefly see prophetic visions. These could be anything from something as mundane as weather forecasts, to huge opportunities and grand visions of the future, and so on. So when Zagora touches this stone, she goes on what you might call a bit of a bad trip. Normally, these flashes of prophecy are, like I said, fairly mundane, but when she touched this specific stone, it sparked a grander vision. She was paralyzed briefly, thrown into a stupor, and just kind of got messed up. Ultimately, they take the stone to an expert to confirm there's something mysterious or special about it, and of course it is, but more importantly, there's something about Zagora's specific connection to it. She is the seer for this particular stone, for whatever reason. So they take it to the local Azerite temple, who then takes the stone and Zagora herself, kicking Nixar to the curb. And at this point, he's pretty sure she's dead. It's been a few days, the entire city is being picked through for chaos influence with a fine comb. The way that they came into possession of this seeing stone was probably shady at best. It's just a mess, right? He's sure that she was found to be some type of heretic or something like that, some chaos visionary. And so we see him in a point of pure grief when he bumps into a group of her former soldiers that say, of course she's alive, they're headed to her now. And what we find out later through dialogue is that Zagora does have a connection to this stone, but its prophecy showed her the establishment of a new outpost of order called Ardent Keep. The church, rather than killing her for being a heretic, lauded her and called her the Dawnbringer, a prophet or prophetess that sees in their mind a divine vision that they think is from Sigmar to lead the next Dawnbringer crusade. So at this point, Nixar he's just ecstatic. He's like, oh, she's not dead. Not only that, but she's super important. Okay, we can work with this. And fitting with her new role within the temple that she was just kind of sucked into without any sort of option, I guess you could say, Zagora shaved her head. She has the stone in sort of a headdress thing going on, and has been thrust into the role of a religious icon and leader of a crusade that is on its way out of the city. Now Nixar, knowing he'd be hunted as a heretic for his shady business where this whole story started, just decides to join in. He essentially attaches himself to the Free Guild company that his sister was a part of before. A lot of the soldiers, they know him and they recognize him, and so he just kind of is like, well, there's nothing for me in Excelsis, my sister's leaving town, I'll go with her. Meanwhile, Zagora got, in tabletop model terms, quite a promotion from Free Guild Captain to Excelsior War Priest. So now our two characters are about to leave the safety of Excelsis and set out to build a new home in Ger. And we're introduced to a few other characters, for example, a Dwarden engineer who's hired to rapidly build the defenses, some members of the church's clergy, and of course the Stormcast who have been sent there to escort them. These Stormcast Eternals are from the Anvils of the Heldenhammer, so those will be the typical, the gold kind of poster boys for the Stormcast Eternals, and they're led by a Knight Arcanum. Essentially, this is an escort mission for them. Once the settlers make it to their destination, this place they're going to set up called Ardent Keep, they're going to be relieved by a detachment of Knights Excelsior, because this is Ger and it's near Excelsius, it's their territory after all. So the whole crusade sets out. I believe I read at one point it's roughly 2,000 people with a few Stormcast Eternal units. They have the floating islands used in crusades. You can see my video about Dawnbringer Crusades to learn more. And so now I'm going to lay out for you the visions that Zagora had and how they tie into the events that these folks faced. She envisioned a specific hill that they need to camp on by day 3, a river they needed to sail down, and a specific point of arcane power that they needed to set the cornerstone of the new keep on. The problem is, though, these visions are blurry at best. So for example, when they arrive at the first spot they need to camp at, remember, it required a grueling pace of time to get there. They didn't rest for 3 days. It was just pure movement. Then, after the camp was all set up and everyone's starting to chill, it was attacked by all kinds of terrible monsters. These kraken-like beasts burst from the ground. Some grabbed onto people and killed them. Others were crushed as massive tentacles were flailing around. It's like the Kraken was sitting and waiting for the soil to get really saturated with water from rain to burst up and entrap anything nearby. And because of this incident, nearly half the crusade was wiped out, in what you might call a bit of a whoopsie. And so my point is, they're being led by visions, but these visions are not exactly trustworthy or indicate safety. It's not like, oh, if we stick to the plan, things will go well. No, the plan involves an immense amount of danger. The next one, of course, like I said before, is traveling down a river. When they get to the water, the river is filled to the brim with eels and snakes and reptiles and beasts. Like so many creatures in it, there's hardly any water. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I've seen the salmon when they kind of go upstream, there's so many fish that there's almost not enough water to contain them. That's kind of the scene that we get. So they take their ships that they built and sail on the monsters themselves in a really cool scene. And honestly, it's one of those moments in a book that's it's worth buying just to read or listen to that. I really enjoyed it a lot. Finally, they arrive at the location they were headed to, and Zagora becomes weird and sullen. She knew to bring them to this spot, but not exactly which hill Ardent Keep needed to be built upon. So, when they made their best guess, construction began. And this is great because we get a little montage of Nixar walking around with the Dwarden engineer talking about the designs and the plans for the keep, and it lets us kind of see what's in their head, that Sigmar has put down strictures and basically documentation of this is how we expand into the world. So that scene was really, really important for us to understand that I think expansion is definitely part of the next big theme for Age of Sigmar. So the keep is being built, but meanwhile, the Stormcast Eternals who went with them are getting very troubled. Their relief, the Knights Excelsior, should have been here by now. In fact, they should have been here when they arrived. And along the way, they're realizing as they traveled, there should have been multiple outposts that were visible by now. So they made the decision to split up. Some Stormcast would stay with Ardent Keep, others would go look for these other, pockets of civilization outposts of Sigmar. Or, failing that, the Knights Excelsior that were sent to replace them. And it's here that our story splits into what the Stormcast experience out abroad and what's going on back at the keep with our heroes Zagora and Nixar. For the Stormcast, they had what you might call a bit of a bad day. I'm going to start with that. Technically, a couple of days. They walk down into a foggy bank, knowing roughly where the next outpost should be, although it's Ger and land masses are always moving, so there's a little bit of wiggle room for kind of getting a little bit lost. But the fog just seems absolutely impenetrable, until they come across a small beat-up building, and then another, and they quickly realize this is the outpost we were looking for, but all the people are gone. Searching the town, they come to a massive watchtower towards the center of the city. Inside, suspended several stories up, is a net with all the beasts of the town, cows, pigs, and so on, which doesn't make any sense, as anything they knew of in Ger wouldn't net them up, right? It would just eat them, right? Gargant would just pick it up and eat the cow. He wouldn't, like, net it. But the Stormcast begin walking up the stairs to examine this when it dawns on them that this is not a pile of livestock. The entire town's population was rounded up, tossed into a net, and hoisted way up on high. They're still alive, but they're gagged. And so at this point, desperately trying to beg for the Stormcast Eternals to free them, the Stormcast start bolting up the stairs to be like, we gotta get these people out of here, and on their way up, one of them snags a tripwire, and the entire net containing a city's worth of people falls to the ground with a dull thud. Friends, this is a super dark scene, and in my mind is our first real introduction to the Cruel Boys. Now at this point, they decide, we need to get back, right? But they keep hearing this laughing, that they're being taunted, and so they follow after it. They're like, we're gonna get whoever did this to this entire civilization, whoever set us up to kill them, with the trap. We need to stomp this out. And after a very long chase, they realize that they've been running in circles chasing this voice. And its sole purpose was to lead them in these circles so it would keep them from going back to Ardent Keep. And it's interesting to follow the Stormcast logic, because they're seeing, they struck down one person who was definitely a greenskin, right? They're like, okay, so we know orcs are doing this, but we've never seen greenskins do this before, like set a trap, divide us up, that kind of thing. And it actually is an immense amount of fun in this book, watching all of the characters try to understand what's happening. And so I truly enjoyed that about this. Eventually, they make it back just in time for the city to be assailed by a full Cruel Boy army. But remember, when we had that split between the Stormcast that stayed and the ones that went, we focused on the ones that went. Well, let's talk about the ones who stayed, right? The exploration crew was out seeing some horrific things. The folks back in Ardent Keep had pushed hard and essentially built most of a fortress. There's a whole cool side story about how they got the resources and materials to make this happen. But also some stories about what's wrong with it. And I'll pass that over for you to read later. But essentially, the keep is about 75% done when Zagora has another vision. The city was built in the wrong place. It should have been on the next hill over, and that moment when she shares that information is when the Cruel Boys attack. Now, as far as battle scenes go, this was a fantastic one. It's, I think, one of my first books by Darius Hinks, and I think he nailed the setting and the armies at play, right? The Stormcast Eternals just arrived and basically treat these like any other greenskins. You go directly for the leader, strike him down, and the whole army crumbles as other warlords try to assert dominance, and that's just how orcs work. We follow their logic to the T, and it makes perfect sense. While the Cruel Boys open up a bunch of penned beasts that they brought alongside them and make a stampede pointed directly at Ardent Keep. And this scene was baller, y'all. It was awesome. The battle goes back and forth between the attackers and defenders until the walls get ruined and there's just green skins everywhere. Zagora sends Nixar and the others that she can find to the next hill over, hoping they can slip out of the battle and basically restart Ardent Keep where it should have been laid in the first place. Zagora herself helps the Stormcast Eternals leader over to the main tower where they had already built because she has a plan. See, Stormcast Eternals now, with their crazy armor and sort of as a new plot element, I guess you could say, violently explode upon death. And it's something that we've seen in stories, they kind of blast out into lightning and go back to Azir, but now we're kind of using it almost as a weapon at this point. And so she lays this Stormcast on the cornerstone of this tower, and when he dies from his wounds, he blasts up to Azir. The power of that dead nation blows up the siphon of power that the whole city was built around, and the blast kills everything around it, basically eliminating all of the greenskins at once. She basically does like a Bruce Willis in Armageddon and just detonates the entire thing, saving everybody. The survivors, and there are many, move down and begin work on the new Ardent Keep, and we actually know that it did survive, as the last chapter has a different crew kind of stumbling upon it. Hey Wargamers, Doug here, and I have something to improve your hobby no matter what game you play. The Level Up is a game table system designed to raise and increase your gaming space in an easy and efficient way. You don't have to buy a $5,000 mega Uber gaming table of excellence kind of a thing. Because the level up uses a system of interlocking tiles raised up 6 inches by stainless steel non-slip legs. And because of the different options you have on where you put those leg mounts in, you can actually increase the size of your gaming surface. So here's what I mean. My dining room table is a 42-inch wide circle. However, I took the skirmish variant of the level up and I was able to turn that into a perfect 3 foot by 4 foot gaming table. And there are actually 5 sizes that this system supports. Now, in addition to having the very common, sizes of boards that we would play on, as I said before, the level up raises your gaming space up 6 inches. And if you're tall like me at 6'3", it's a blessing for your back. In addition, each copy of your level up, no matter what size you get, comes with these really nifty clips. So if you do put, say, a D&D map, or of course your neoprene gaming mat that a lot of us use in this hobby, you can clip it and secure it there so there's no sliding around whatsoever. But what's interesting is that even if you already have your own 6 foot by 4 foot table, the fact that it's now raised up means you can use the real estate underneath your table. So you're actually gaining room for all of your reference material, your measuring stuff, where dead units can go. All those kinds of things fit really well underneath there. And so I even put a battle tome sideways so you can see just how much room there is. The level up crushed its Kickstarter, doing exceptionally well, and now that product is fully hitting the market, all funded and ready to go. So if you would like one, go ahead and check it out in the link down below. Now, back to the video. Now, this is a painfully short overview of a fantastic book, and I want to talk about some of the themes that I think really stood out here. One of the discussions that happens a lot in the book is this idea of sacrifice, meaning not just in the sense of, what people have to give up in order to succeed, but what is the nature of those sacrifices as well. So, for example, the Stormcast leader at one point in the story abandons an entire Free Guild regiment to die so that the people he's protecting, the main characters, can go to their location. He's like, if we stop to help them, we're dead. We have to keep moving. There's no slowing down. And so that is a point of discussion between Zagora leading the crusade and the Stormcast there to protect it, of just why can't we save them? We have to save them. It's the ethical thing to do. Whereas the Stormcast is no, I'm happy to sacrifice those soldiers on their own mission as a distraction for us to achieve ours. And then later on, that same Stormcast leader is the one who detonates the trap and inadvertently kills an entire city worth of people, and it weighs on him then. And so you get these reoccurring themes of he's killing people functionally, but it's in different contexts, and they start to weigh on him more and more and more until ultimately he is literally the one that is sacrificed on the cornerstone to detonate all of the orcs. Next up are the Dangers of Ger. I feel like the story, it kind of had a very quick pace to it once you're in Excelsius, but once we leave the city, I feel like Darius Hinks did a fantastic job of showing you what Ger is like. The monsters, the beasts, the orc raids, the fact that other survivors and people trying to plant cities are out there getting attacked and mauled, and you can maybe hear their battles, but you can't help them because you can't help everybody, kind of a thing. It was just great environmental storytelling. And the reason I point that out is because it seemed like last year we were really focused on Shyish. Everything just centered around Shyish. And now it's Ger, which is fantastic, and this book does a great job of giving you a feel for that setting where presumably we're going to be for a while, and I like that. Kind of along with that same note is the fact that he also does a really good job of showing us what Excelsius, the city, is like. So a lot of times people have asked me in comments Doug, what is the city of Sigmar like day to day? Well, we get it for Excelsius, which is probably not the best example. But essentially, we see a city on the brink. My assumption with this book is that the events of Kragnos have already happened, right? So, he came through smashing stuff, the city's rebuilding, it's recouping, and is now trying to expand. So, they're constantly purging chaos. That's a huge thing, that there's this constant inquisition going on in the city to purge chaos. The Knights Excelsior are terrifying. Every description of them makes them sound like people you would never run to for help. The city magistrates and the church, they all seem not necessarily corrupt, but kind of in their own world. They don't really care about other people to an extent. or maybe they just view folks as tools to achieve their means, that kind of thing. It's a rough city in a rough world. But dovetailing off of that, this book does a great job of showing us what it's like to found a new city, right? If you don't like it there, go make your own somewhere else. And what does that process look like? And it's, I'm going to use the word harrowing as my descriptor. I think the idea is like if 1 out of every 20 city or outposts works, then it's like a good success rate. Like that's not great. But we get to see what the building process is like. They've mentioned a few important documents that the Church of Ger would hold in terms of this is how the God King has decreed we should build cities. And I mentioned how that all works in my Dawnbringer Crusade video. Like I said, I'll have a link to it down below. But it is very fascinating to see it in action. So anyway, friends, that is Dominion by Darius Hinks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you go back and check out my my book club thing about it. We were just chatting about our favorite scenes and things that made us happy. Let me know your thoughts on the overall story, what you'd like to see going forward, and did you like the book? Let me know, and I would love to read it there. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.